What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo. I know you're probably expecting Mikey for this trade target video, but he's got some work stuff that he's dealing with. So he asked me to tag in for him. Coming at you with the week 9 trade targets. I know in probably about a week or two are most of your trade deadlines in your fantasy league. So these trade targets are starting to get really important because this is what can kind of push you from a fringe playoff team to a contender. And we're not really necessarily talking dynasty, but you can apply some of this to dynasty as well if you're in the hunt this year and you're looking for someone who's going to be very valuable going forward for the rest of the season. So if at any point in this video, you guys know the drill, hit the like button if you receive any value, if you receive any advice, something that you didn't know already. Comment down below any of your thoughts, maybe who you should trade for, if you should sell any of these people, any kind of thing like that. You can also comment any start sits you might have down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, hit the bell icon so you're notified anytime we go live, anytime we post videos, because we don't really have any rhyme or reason for posting anything because we're all college students and all that kind of stuff. So we just kind of post things whenever we have a chance to. So we're going to hit the intro and then we'll get right into this. All right, so first up on the docket here, we have kind of a package deal, not necessarily go out and acquire them both, but because they're both on the same team and they're both kind of buy low targets right now, I figured I'd talk about them both at the same time. And that's quarterback Lamar Jackson, tight end Mark Andrews. So both guys on the Ravens. This one's very narrative driven, in my opinion. I think a lot of people are really discounting these guys. They're like, man, these guys are streamers. I totally disagree with this narrative. Many people are down on these two, and for good reason, though. Like to be fair, neither of them have played like the locked and loaded every week stud at their respective positions. But I put this poll out on Twitter, and I did this trade, and I kind of wanted to know what the public perception was, and I was actually pretty shocked by how close it was. But I said, who do you prefer rest of season, Mark Andrews or Rob Gronkowski? I was expecting like 65% Mark Andrews. It was actually a lot closer, and it started to pull away more so towards Mark Andrews, but at the beginning, it was like 50-50, neck and neck. And basically, I think it's a great example of selling high on a player and buying low on a player because Gronkowski's a solid tight end option. Don't get me wrong, but there's always injury risk with him. He's currently dealing with like a shoulder injury. And we know Rob Gronkowski is just a shoe-in to get injured at some point. He's only played 16 games like one time in his entire career. So the reason our perception is so high on Rob Gronkowski, and he's kind of like my sell high candidate at the tight end position, although I do think he is still quite a good option. I just would sell him high for a better option like Mark Andrews, is because he scored in the last 3 games. Each of the last 3 games, he scored a touchdown. And that's why everyone is thinking like, he's like, okay, him and Brady are back. And that might be true, but I also don't think if he doesn't score, he's not going to be very good. And you can say that for a lot of tight ends, but Mark Andrews at his peak is still a very good option, even when he doesn't score. So if you can sell him for someone like Mark Andrews or Darren Waller or something like that, I would definitely be selling Gronkowski for one of those guys. So on to the Ravens guys here. These two guys are great players, Andrews and Lamar Jackson. They're great, talented players. They're going through a rough stretch in their schedule right now, and I have confidence that they'll bounce back to what we saw earlier this season and also to last season. Maybe not the height that we saw last season, but earlier this season, Andrews and Lamar looked every bit like the every week starters you drafted them to be. So right now, their schedule to close out the season is very favorable. Plus, they've already had their bye week. And in this example, Gronkowski has not yet. So if you are selling Gronkowski, you're also getting a week out of this from Mark Andrews because he's already had his bye and Gronkowski hasn't. So as you can see here, the Patriots, the Titans, the Steelers, the Cowboys, the Browns, the Jaguars, the Giants, and the Bengals are the next teams that they play. And obviously, you ignore week 17 for fantasy purposes. But after this week against Indianapolis for the Ravens, they only have one defense that ranks inside the top 18 in total defensive DVOA in Pittsburgh. And the Pats rank 27, the Titans rank 20, Cowboys rank 24, Browns rank 19, Jags rank dead last, and the Giants rank 18. And the 2 playoff matchups obviously are the Jags and the Giants, which are 2 great matchups. If you're acquiring these guys for a playoff push, maybe you're trying to get an upgrade at quarterback or tight end or whatever the case is. Additionally, 3 of these teams will be in the hunt for very high draft picks. The Cowboys, the Jags, and the Giants. Those guys are going to be in the hunt for draft picks. And usually when that happens, teams start shutting players down. So if James Bradbury gets like an ankle injury in practice or something in week 14, the Giants might just shut him down for the year because they're not playing for anything. It's a first-year coach. He's probably not going to get fired because he showed some things so far. But I could totally see the Giants shutting down a lot of players. Same goes for the Cowboys and the Jags. So by the time they actually play these teams, they might be even worse than they already are. And not only that, but some of these coaches might get fired too. The Jags will probably fire Doug Marrone. Maybe not. Maybe they'll wait till the end of the season. The Cowboys honestly could fire Mike McCarthy. Like, it wouldn't totally shock me. He's not a good coach. So all these teams could get even worse than they already are. And then to me, I just think you go out and acquire these guys. It's a risk, sure, but the ceiling is tremendous, as we've seen. The ceiling is these guys are every week starters and you don't even have to worry about them. And we've seen this ceiling this year from them. It's not like I'm talking about only Lamar Jackson's MVP year, which obviously he's regressed a bit, but I do think he's going to fall somewhere in the middle. I think this right now, he's playing at his floor and he's not going to necessarily get to his ceiling, what we saw him last year, but I think he'll be somewhere in the middle, which is definitely a top 5 quarterback in my opinion, for fantasy purposes. So I think it's just big time recency bias on these guys. Go out and acquire them if the owners are panicking and want to get rid of them for absolutely nothing. Okay, to the running back position. A buy that I have at the running back position is going to be Antonio Gibson. A couple things with Gibson. For starters, we have to remember that this was a college wide receiver. So Antonio Gibson has played like 8 games in the NFL at a position that he did not play in college. Yes, he got carries, but he was not a running back. He was not in the running back room in college. He was a wide receiver running routes and all that kind of stuff. So the progress he's shown through this rookie season that he's been on is going to continue to happen. He's going to get better every single week because he's continuing to learn the position. Secondly, he's already shown to be a very good running back despite all this. He's ranking top 10 in yards per route run at the running back position, which is expected because he was a college wide receiver. He's ranking top 10 in juke rate, evaded tackles, and all that kind of stuff. And if you put that stuff per attempt, he ranks even better because he hasn't had as many attempts as some of these other guys. So going back to the offseason, Adrian Peterson, when he was released, you'll see this on the screen right now, but Josina Anderson, he had like a conversation with her, and he basically cited the coaching staff wanting one main guy to be the bell cow runner and receiver. And I think the reason it hasn't happened yet is because Gibson was getting acclimated to the NFL, getting acclimated to the running back position. And the reason I think it's going to happen this week is when they start integrating him more and get him up to that 65, 70% snap share and get him running more routes and all that kind of stuff, is because Washington is coming off of their bye. And we've seen this as a real thing. Post-bye rookie bump. We saw it with J.K. Dobbins. We're going to continue to see it as more and more teams go on bye and more rookie running backs and rookie receivers and all that kind of stuff get involved, because on bye weeks, coaches generally study strategy and they're going, okay, so what's working, what's not working. They're going to look at the tape. They're going to be like, okay, Antonio is way better than J.D. McKissic as a receiver and a runner. So we need to get him more involved in the receiving game specifically because he's just not really on the field enough in terms of his snap share to actually be involved in the receiving game to the extent that he should be, in my opinion. Obviously, Gibson is going to be, it should see an uptick in this kind of stuff, but the coaching staff will have to decide if his routes, targets, and snaps need to go up. This presents to me a great buying window before this happens, mainly because he was out of sight, out of mind last week, given the fact that he was on bye. And I think next week might be perfect to buy him after this week if he struggles against the Giants, because they are a pretty difficult matchup. But, and of course, if his usage is really high, if he plays like 70% of the snaps and has like 14 carries for like 28 yards because it's a tough matchup and he has like a couple receptions, that would be the ideal situation. However, I don't know if I would wait that long, because I do think there's a chance that he comes out and he's the feature back going forward and you'll miss your buying window, because if the guy who owns Gibson now is a smart fantasy player, and they probably are if they drafted Gibson, because you kind of had to be a little bit forward thinking to draft a guy like that or to acquire someone like that. So I would imagine that they're going to know that Gibson's very involved in getting more and more snaps and targets and routes and stuff like that. So I would buy Gibson now if you're going to buy him. Not only that, but he has a very favorable stretch of schedule coming up, as you can see on the screen right now. He goes up against after this week against the Giants, he goes up against the Lions, Bengals, Cowboys, Steelers, who are a tough matchup, 49ers, Seahawks, Panthers to close out the fantasy season. And obviously this week against New York will be tough, as I mentioned. But after this, he sees a lot of great matchups, minus Pittsburgh, of course, including excellent games for the fantasy playoffs against the Panthers and Seahawks, who are two of the worst defenses in the league, especially at stopping running backs. So I think Antonio Gibson is a great buy. If you can go out and get him for someone like, I don't know, like I like Justin Jackson, but Eckler's going to come back eventually. If you can get him for someone like Justin Jackson, if you could get him for one of the Niners running backs, if you could get him for, I mean, I'd almost be willing to sell a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire for him. I don't think I would go that far, but if you could get Antonio Gibson plus a piece for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I would definitely be willing to do that. Nonetheless, I think Gibson is the perfect guy to buy back half of the season. And I actually predicted one of my bold predictions going into the season. I did this on Notorious Fantasy's channel. I said that Antonio Gibson will be the number one owned player on championship rosters because I think he can have like a Alvin Kamara's rookie year type back half of the season. So make sure you go out and buy Gibson if you can get him for cheap. Obviously, coming off a 20 carry game going into his bye week, the owner might be a little bit more stingy in trading him, but I still think you can get him for less than what he's worth, regardless of that owner stance. To the sell at the running back position, and probably a lot of you are expecting this. Todd Gurley, he's my sell at the running back position. Now, I don't want to be that guy that says, well, if you look back and Todd Gurley didn't score those touchdowns, because he did. He scored the touchdowns and they helped you win fantasy matchups. Like touchdowns count. Whether he was supposed to score them or not, he scored them. However, Todd Gurley is not good at football. He's just not. That's a fact. He's currently number 66 in fantasy points per opportunity, even though he ranks top 10 in running back opportunities. He's number 40 in yards per route run, number 54 in yards per touch, number 39 breakaway run rate. He's number 50 in true yards per carry. You get the point. He sucks. He's so inefficient, and he's getting lucky with touchdowns. That's what the fact is. Obviously, they count as fantasy points, but I don't think it's sustainable. The big thing is that he's not involved in the passing game, and they're starting to give him fewer and fewer chances in the passing game, taking him off the field more often. He's averaging a 43% route participation, which is only going down, and only 1.6 receptions per game, which we saw against Carolina. He had 0. So I think this is Todd Gurley's time in the sun is coming to an end. And the reason I say that is because he has played Green Bay, Carolina twice, Detroit, and Minnesota the last 5 weeks. None of them rank in the top 18 in run defense DVOA, and Green Bay, Carolina, and Detroit, Carolina, who he played twice, are all allowing the top 5 most fantasy points per game to the running back position. So he has literally played 3 of the easiest 5 matchups over the last 4 games. So I think the next couple weeks is different. If you look at this Atlanta's schedule coming up, they have the Broncos this week, I believe. Yeah, so they have the Broncos this week. Then they have the Saints twice. They have the Raiders, the Chargers, the Bucks, and the Chiefs to close out the fantasy season. In this stretch, he plays top run defense, like elite level run defenses in the Saints twice, the Bucks and the Broncos. All 4 of those matchups are really good against the run, and then above average run defenses in the Chargers and Chiefs. The only good matchup, which Gurley has been completely dependent on, as I talked about, is Las Vegas in week 12. Plus, Todd Gurley still has his bye week. He hasn't been on bye yet, which is a big deal if you're trying to make a playoff push and if you need every ounce of production you can get. Selling a guy like Todd Gurley helps you avoid a bye week if you want to sell him for someone like Josh Jacobs or Antonio Gibson or Miles Sanders or James Robinson, someone who's already had a bye week that you don't have to worry about having to absorb that bye. My number one guy that I would be willing to sell him for is James Robinson, because I think he is the most valuable of the guys I just mentioned. And I think some people who own James Robinson might be a little concerned that Gardner Minshew is no longer the quarterback. But the amount of passing game usage that James Robinson is seeing, it's not going to matter who the quarterback is. And I do think Jake Luton or whoever the quarterback ends up being will throw to James Robinson as much as Gardner Minshew did. So not only that, here's another thing that you have to keep in mind is that Todd Gurley's an old running back. He's older. He's got a lot of tread on the tires, and he's been dealing with a large workload this whole season. I think his efficiencies are only going down because he's been inefficient so far this season. I think he's going to continue to get less and less efficient because as the season goes on, his body is wearing down and all that kind of stuff. So to the wide receiver position, to be honest, I couldn't find a lot of obvious buys at the wide receiver position, but here are some guys that I do like. I like Mike Evans. I like Terry McLaurin. I like Corey Davis, and then Mike, likes Corey Davis and Marvin Jones. And I also don't mind DJ Chark. So first, on Mike Evans, he may have a bad game this week. He's going up against Marshawn Lattimore, who hasn't been that great, but has notoriously had his number in coverage when they're matched up against each other. And if Antonio Brown has a great game, if he has like 7 receptions for, I don't know, like 80 yards and a touchdown or something on only like 2 series and like 30% of the snaps, everyone's going to get super excited. They're going to write Mike Evans off. But what they fail to realize is if Antonio Brown's the stud that he's always been, and I think he's going to be, because Antonio Brown, in my opinion, is the best receiver I've ever watched play football in my lifetime. I never really got to see a lot of Randy Moss's prime, so I can't really speak on Randy Moss because I'm pretty young. But number one, if Antonio Brown is the guy that we all think he is, he makes this offense better, and it probably makes it the best passing attack in the NFL. If Antonio Brown is the stud receiver he has always been, this is the best passing attack in the NFL, and you want pieces of that. Obviously, Mike Evans is a piece of that passing game. Number two, teams will start to shift coverage and put lockdown corners on Antonio Brown instead of Mike Evans. Antonio Brown is a first ballot Hall of Famer in terms of talent and production. If it wasn't for his mental kind of issues, that'll probably keep him out of the Hall of Fame for a little bit of time, but he's still going in because he is probably the best receiver of this generation. And Mike Evans has never had a guy like that across from him. Yes, Chris Godwin was there last year, but Mike Evans still took the brunt of the shadow corners and the bracket coverage and all that kind of stuff. Mike Evans has never had a player like this on his team. And I think he's going to feast as a result of that if Antonio Brown is able to establish himself in this offense. So I think Mike Evans, after this week specifically, I wouldn't go trading for him this week because I think it's dependent on what Antonio Brown does. And it also helps if Mike Evans has a bad game this week against Marshawn Lattimore, because I think that's when the overreaction narrative-y kind of stuff happens. So keep an eye on Mike Evans this week. If he has a bad game and AB has a good game, then start calling about Mike Evans to the Mike Evans owner. On Terry McLaurin, he's faced a number of shadow matchups and difficult corners so far this season, and he's been great despite that. But he now enters a schedule, which will be on the screen right now, and I had this on the screen for Gibson, with literally 0 shutdown guys. If you could see all those teams, none of them have shutdown corners. The only shutdown corner he has for the rest of the season is this week against New York and James Bradbury. So after this week, he's going to be great. He's going to have no shutdown matchups. And not only that, but if Gibson becomes the bell cow running back and starts becoming more and more efficient, as I predicted earlier, then that takes away some attention from McLaurin, and it also makes the offense better overall, which helps McLaurin. So I think Terry McLaurin, we have yet to see the best of him this season. He's been good, yeah, but I think he's going to be even better to close out the season because this is the easy part of his schedule. And then Davis and Jones, Corey Davis and Marvin Jones were Mike's guys that he asked me to talk about. I kind of disagree on Corey Davis, to be honest. I would actually rather sell high on him because I think everyone has caught on in your leagues and stuff like that, that he's been good so far this season. He's been almost as good as AJ Brown. So I think he's actually more so worth a sell high candidate because I think people are kind of overreacting to him a little bit. I still think he's the same guy he's always been. He's just getting targets, and he had one good game last week. So I'm not overreacting about Corey Davis. Is he startable? Is he a top 36 receiver this week? Yeah, but I don't think he's a top 20 receiver for the rest of the season, which I've heard some people kind of make that kind of hot take, and I totally disagree with that. He's not this year's Devontae Parker, if that's what some people think Corey Davis is. And then on Marvin Jones, without Golladay, he's definitely more intriguing because Golladay takes away majority of targets in this offense. But I also think Golladay leaving impacts him negatively from the perspective that the offense gets worse, and he takes away a lot of attention from Marvin Jones. So I'm not really totally on board with either of those guys. But I could be wrong about that, and I do think they're decent dart throw guys who shouldn't be too expensive if you're looking for a cheaper receiver. And then, as I mentioned, I also don't mind DJ Chark as a dart throw trade just because his value is basically nothing right now. Teams, I bet he's been dropped in a lot of leagues. I'd have to check the percentages, but I bet people have dropped him because he's we have Jake Luton starting at quarterback, right? But my thing with Jake Luton is he going to be worse than Minshew? Because Minshew has been playing terribly. And not only that, but Jake Luton is a late round quarterback. So was Gardner Minshew last year. What if Jake Luton comes out and plays better than Gardner Minshew? And not only that, what if Jake Luton comes out and doesn't throw the ball to Keelan Cole like Gardner Minshew does? We could see DJ Chark have a slight increase with Jake Luton at quarterback. Again, it's a dart throw trade. You could probably get him for almost nothing. That's the only reason he's on this list. I don't think you have to trade a lot for him. And that's the only reason I'm interested is because he does have upside still. So keep that in mind. And obviously this could change after this week. If he has a bad week, we might just be like, fuck, drop DJ Chark because he's just terrible at this point. And then last type of buy at receiver that I want to mention real quick is the rookies that haven't broken out yet. So you won't be able to get T. Higgins. You won't be able to get Brandon Ayuk or CeeDee Lamb or Justin Jefferson or Chase Claypool because these guys have all broke out. Everyone knows that they're good. But guys like Henry Ruggs, who people have forgot about, guys like Jerry Jeudy, who people have forgotten about, Jalen Reagor, Maybe even some of the cheaper guys. I think all of these rookies that haven't broken out yet, you could get for cheap. And a lot of those guys I just mentioned have more favorable schedules coming up. And I think they could pay off. Jerry Jeudy, as soon as this week, if you were to trade for him, I think he's going to be good this week against Atlanta. Same goes for Henry Ruggs. He's starting to get more and more involved in terms of his snap share and route participation, all that kind of stuff. So they present a decent buy low opportunity as well. All right. Finally, before we get out of here, wide receiver sell. A guy that I'm selling is DJ Moore. DJ Moore just went through an easy stretch. He went through a very easy stretch of games of pass defenses that he went against, and he was fine. He played well, but he did not see any elite target volume except for the 11 target game he saw against Chicago. And other than that game, he failed to get more than 6 targets since week 2 against the Buccaneers. So DJ Moore is a boomer bust guy. He's not going to get 8 targets, 10 targets a game like we initially anticipated, myself included. I was really high on DJ Moore coming into the season, and he's been disappointing from a target volume perspective. Teddy Bridgewater, for whatever reason, just likes Robbie Anderson better. I can't explain it. And this is a relatively low-scoring offense. Their schedule is tightening up as well. Panthers play the Chiefs, the Buccaneers, the Lions, the Vikings, the Broncos, the Packers, and the Washington football team to close out the fantasy season. And yes, the Lions and Vikings are good matchups in that stretch, but they're sandwiched in between 2 bad matchups or 3 bad matchups to close out the season. And in the fantasy playoffs, going against the Broncos, the Packers, and the Washington football team are not exactly ideal. I think, not to mention, CMC is coming back this week, and he is the focal point of this offense. Yes, Mike Davis filled in kind of admirably for him, but I think this offense changes once CMC comes back because CMC demands that kind of change. And he'll be commanding his targets and will become the focal point again, as I just talked about. So DJ Moore is a great player. Don't get me wrong. He's an excellent player. He's going to create big plays here and there, but Teddy prefers Robbie Anderson. Clearly, he's out targeting DJ Moore like crazy. I'm pretty sure Robbie Anderson's like 3rd or 2nd in the league in receiving yards, despite switching teams this offseason. And plus, again, they still have a bye week. The Panthers still have a bye week. So you're going to have to absorb a bye week still. And if you could, that could be pivotal given the fact that their bye week is in week 13. That could either be a playoff matchup for you if your playoffs start early, or it could be a very pivotal game that you need to win if you're a borderline playoff team. If you're 6-5 going into that game, or 6 and I can't even think of the math right now. But if you need a win that week and you don't have DJ Moore because he's on bye, that alone might be worth trading him, because I think you can get a guy like, I don't know, Justin Jefferson or Deontay Johnson or something like that. Like, I would much prefer guys like that who have consistent target volume, who are in better offenses too, and they're more consistent week over week. So DJ Moore is definitely a guy I'd be selling right now if you have him. He's had a couple of good games that he's strung together. So you should be able to convince other fantasy owners that he's kind of turning a corner and all that kind of stuff. So that's it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this. As I mentioned, if you did enjoy it, hit the button that looks like this. It's a like button. It takes 2 seconds and it helps the channel out tremendously. Comment any of your thoughts down below if you agree, disagree with any of my takes. If you want to advice on any trades that you're going to make or about to make. And then subscribe to the channel if you're new, of course, and hit the bell icon so you're notified anytime we post videos. Peace out, guys. Enjoy your Thursday.